Jake was a typical college student, juggling coursework, part-time jobs, and a passionate love for gaming. His tiny dorm room was a sanctuary, filled with posters of game characters, collectibles, and his prized possession, a high-end gaming PC. He often spent his free time diving into virtual worlds, escaping the stresses of real life. One rainy evening, Jake decided to visit a local thrift store, hoping to find some unique gaming memorabilia. As he wandered through the dusty aisles, a peculiar item caught his eye, a vintage game console, covered in grime and adorned with strange symbols. Intrigued, he asked the store owner about it. "Ah, that old thing," the owner said with a wary look. "It was donated a few weeks ago. No one knows where it came from. Some say it's cursed, but I think it's just an old piece of junk." Jake laughed off the warning and bought the console for a bargain price. When he got back to his dorm, he eagerly set it up. The console was unlike any he'd seen before, with an eerie glow emanating from the power button. He connected it to his TV and turned it on. The screen flickered to life, displaying a single game title, Eternal Abyss. Jake's curiosity was piqued. He grabbed the ancient controller, which felt cold and oddly heavy in his hands, and started the game. The graphics were surprisingly advanced for such an old console, depicting a dark, desolate world. The protagonist was a lone wanderer, navigating through a labyrinthine city filled with shadowy figures. As Jake played, he noticed something strange. Every decision he made in the game seemed to have real-world consequences. The lights in his room would flicker, objects would shift slightly, and he could hear faint whispers echoing from the corners. Determined to unravel the mystery, Jake played deeper into the night. The game grew increasingly unsettling, with the in-game characters addressing him directly, begging for help or issuing cryptic warnings. At one point, the Wanderer encountered a mirror in the game, and Jake saw his own reflection staring back at him, eyes wide with fear. As the hours passed, the lines between the game and reality blurred. Jake's reflection began to move independently, mimicking his actions with a sinister grin. He tried to turn off the console, but the power button refused to respond. Panic set in as he realized he was trapped. Desperate, Jake continued playing, hoping to find a way out. The Wanderer reached the heart of the city, where a massive, ancient tree stood. Its roots twisted and writhed, and at its base was a locked door. The whispers grew louder, urging him to find the key. Jake's heart raced as he guided the Wanderer through a series of harrowing challenges, each more terrifying than the last. The room grew colder, and he could see his breath misting in the air. Finally, the Wanderer found the key, hidden within the chest of a lifeless figure. With trembling hands, Jake unlocked the door. Beyond it was a dark, pulsating void. The screen flickered, and a message appeared, "Do you wish to escape?" Jake selected yes, but the screen remained dark. A chilling voice filled the room, "The only escape is through the abyss." Suddenly, the void on the screen expanded, spilling out into Jake's room. Tendrils of darkness wrapped around him, pulling him towards the console. He fought to break free, but the grip was too strong. Just as he was about to be consumed, he remembered the strange symbols on the console. With a surge of adrenaline, Jake grabbed a pen and hastily copied the symbols onto his arm, mimicking the exact patterns. The tendrils recoiled, and the console emitted a blinding light. Jake was thrown back, and the console shattered into pieces. Gasping for breath, Jake looked around. The room was still, the whispers gone. The game console lay in ruins, its curse seemingly broken. Jake vowed never to speak of the incident, fearing no one would believe him. But as he lay in bed that night, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was still being watched. He glanced at the mirror and saw, just for a moment, his reflection smirking back at him. The next day, Jake returned to the thrift store, intent on disposing of the console fragments. But the store was gone, replaced by an empty lot. Confused, he asked a passerby about the store's whereabouts. "The thrift store," the man replied, puzzled. "There hasn't been a store there for years." Jake's blood ran cold. He threw the console fragments into a nearby dumpster and walked away, hoping to leave the nightmare behind. But deep down, he knew the game wasn't over. Somewhere, the eternal abyss awaited its next player, hungry for another soul. And Jake could still hear the whispers in the shadows, calling his name. So, next time you come across an old, forgotten piece of technology, think twice before you take it home. Some things are better left in the past, undisturbed. In the small, sleepy town of Crest Fall, nestled deep in the heart of rural America, there was an old, abandoned arcade. The building, known as Retro Rewind, had been the heart of the town's entertainment for decades. But for the past 20 years, it had stood empty, gathering dust and whispers of ghost stories. Among the most chilling of these tales was the story of the cursed game cabinet that still sat inside. As the story goes, Retro Rewind was thriving in the late 80s. One night, a mysterious new game cabinet appeared. It had no branding, no instructions, just a dark, foreboding screen that invited players to insert a coin. The game, known only as The Abyss, became an instant hit, with its graphics and gameplay far ahead of its time. However, as players progressed, they started to notice eerie similarities between the game and real life. Objects in the game world appeared in the real world, and vice versa. One night, a group of teenagers, intrigued by the legend, decided to break into the old arcade. Alex, Mia, Ryan, and Jenny had grown up hearing the stories and dared each other to find out the truth. Armed with flashlights and a sense of adventure, they slipped into the arcade through a broken window. The air inside was thick with dust, and the faint smell of mildew hung in the air. Flashlight beams danced across the room, illuminating old game cabinets covered in cobwebs. The eerie silence was broken only by the occasional creak of the wooden floorboards. As they made their way through the arcade, they found it, the abyss. The cabinet stood in the center of the room, its screen dark and lifeless. Alex, the bravest of the group, approached and, with a trembling hand, inserted a quarter. The screen flickered to life, casting an eerie blue glow across the room. The game's title appeared in jagged letters, and a haunting melody played from the speakers. Without hesitation, Alex pressed start. The game's premise was simple: navigate through a dark, maze-like labyrinth filled with traps and monsters. But as Alex played, the room around them began to change. The temperature dropped, and a chilling wind blew through the arcade. Shadows seemed to move on their own, and strange whispers filled the air. Mia, Ryan, and Jenny watched in horror as Alex became more engrossed in the game. His eyes were wide with fear, his hands trembling on the controls. The further he progressed, the more real the game became. Suddenly, the screen flashed a warning: beware the final level. Alex hesitated, but the thrill of discovery pushed him forward. The labyrinth's walls closed in, and the monsters became more aggressive. The game seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy. As Alex reached the final level, the arcade began to shake. The ground beneath them rumbled, and cracks appeared in the walls. The whispers grew louder, almost deafening. Alex's friends tried to pull him away, but it was as if he was glued to the machine. With a final push, Alex defeated the last monster. The screen went black, and for a moment, there was silence. Then, the screen flashed one final message: you have released the curse. The arcade erupted into chaos. The floor split open, revealing a gaping chasm beneath them. Dark, shadowy figures emerged from the rift, their eyes glowing with malevolent intent. The teenagers screamed and ran for the exit, but the shadows pursued them. Mia stumbled and fell, her ankle caught in a crack in the floor. Ryan and Jenny tried to help her, but the shadows were closing in. Alex, still dazed from the game, looked around in a panic. He knew they had to escape, but the exit seemed so far away. Just as the shadows were about to reach them, Alex remembered the final level's clue: the curse could be contained. He ran back to the abyss cabinet and, with all his strength, yanked the plug from the wall. The room fell silent. The shadows vanished, and the arcade returned to its dilapidated state. The chasm closed, and the whispers ceased. The teenagers, shaken and terrified, stumbled out of the building, swearing never to speak of what happened that night. Years later, Retro Rewind was demolished to make way for a new shopping center. The cursed cabinet of the abyss was never found. Some say it was buried beneath the rubble, waiting for its next victim. Others believe it was taken away, its curse still intact, ready to haunt anyone foolish enough to play it. In Crestfall, the legend lives on, a chilling reminder of the horrors that can lurk in the most unexpected places. And for those who dare to seek the truth, the abyss awaits. The gaming world often blurs the line between reality and fiction, but sometimes, the shadows stretch further than we imagine. This is a tale of such an experience, where the boundaries of the digital and the real world dissolved into a terrifying nightmare. Max was an avid gamer, known for his love of horror games. He prided himself on never flinching, no matter how terrifying the virtual monstrosity. One day, Max stumbled upon an old, obscure game called Thornwood Manor. The game had a rustic, almost antiquated look, reminiscent of the early days of PC gaming. The cover art showed an eerie, Gothic mansion shrouded in mist, with a tagline that read, "Enter if you dare, but beware the thorns." Intrigued by the mysterious aura of the game, Max downloaded it immediately. As he launched it, the screen flickered with static, and an ominous melody began to play. The main menu was simple, with options for Start and Quit. Max clicked "Start," and the screen went black. Suddenly, a text appeared. Thornwood Manor was abandoned years ago after a series of inexplicable deaths. The spirits of the restless dead are said to haunt its halls, seeking revenge on those who dare to disturb their eternal slumber. The game began with Max's character, an unnamed protagonist, standing at the entrance of Thornwood Manor. The graphics were surprisingly detailed for such an old game. The mansion loomed ahead, with ivy creeping up its walls and the moon casting long shadows across the ground. Max moved his character forward, the wooden door creaking ominously as he entered. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of decay. Cobwebs hung from the ceiling, and the floorboards groaned underfoot. As Max explored, he noticed something unsettling. The game seemed to react to his movements in a way that felt almost personal. Whispered voices echoed through the halls, murmuring his name. Max. Max. He brushed it off as a clever trick of the game developers, designed to immerse the player. But the deeper he ventured into Thornwood Manor, the more unnerving it became. He found a diary belonging to the previous owner, detailing strange occurrences and the eventual descent into madness. "The thorns, they whisper to me. They know my secrets," one entry read. Max's heart pounded as he read the diary. Just then, the screen glitched, and the lights in his room flickered. A chill ran down his spine. He paused the game and looked around, but everything seemed normal. Shaking off the unease, he continued playing. In the game, he reached a room filled with old, dusty portraits. Each painting depicted a member of the Thornwood family, their eyes following his character's every move. As Max approached the final portrait, he felt a sharp pain in his hand. He looked down to see a thorn protruding from his palm, blood trickling down. Startled, he yanked it out and inspected his hand, but there was no wound. Max's mind raced. Was the game affecting him physically? He pressed on, determined to uncover the secrets of Thornwood Manor. His character descended into the basement, where the atmosphere grew even more oppressive. The walls were lined with thorny vines that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Suddenly, his character was attacked by ghostly apparitions. Max's screen filled with static, and the voices grew louder. "Max, you shouldn't have come here." Panicked, he tried to save the game, but the option was grayed out. The whispers turned into screams, and the screen went black. Max's computer shut down abruptly. He sat there, drenched in sweat, his heart pounding in his chest. He tried to restart the computer, but it wouldn't turn on. Frustrated and scared, he decided to call it a night. As he lay in bed, his mind replayed the events of the game. Just as he was drifting off to sleep, he heard a faint whisper. "Max, come back to Thornwood." His eyes snapped open, and there, at the foot of his bed, stood a shadowy figure, its eyes gleaming with malevolence. Paralyzed with fear, Max watched as the figure moved closer, its form becoming clearer. It was one of the ghostly apparitions from the game, its face twisted in a sinister grin. "You can't escape us, Max. The thorns have claimed you." Max screamed, but no sound came out. The figure lunged at him, and everything went dark. The next morning, Max's friends found his apartment in disarray, his computer shattered on the floor. Max was nowhere to be found. The only clue was his gaming chair, which was covered in thorny vines that seemed to have grown overnight. His friends could only speculate about what had happened, but one thing was clear: Thornwood Manor had claimed another victim. The legend of Thornwood Manor spread among gamers, becoming an urban legend. Those who dared to play the game reported similar experiences, but none were as harrowing as Max's. The game was eventually taken down, but whispers of its existence still linger in the darkest corners of the internet, waiting for the next unsuspecting soul to enter its cursed halls. Remember, some games are not just pixels and code. Some carry the weight of dark histories and restless spirits. So, if you ever come across Thornwood Manor, think twice before you enter. The thorns might be waiting for you too.